Throughout biblical history, when the prophets spoke, they often ran into adversity. People don't exactly like to be told that they're doing something wrong. They don't want their sin pointed out. They don't want their negative areas of their life to be exposed for any reason. And so they were constantly under threat. Even Jesus, when he came, he spoke about Jerusalem and he said, "You who kill the prophets and stone those who are sent to you, how often I've longed to gather you together." And it's like Jesus wanted so badly to say, "Look, I was calling out to you all along, but yet you stoned the prophets. You were always out to get them. My voice was constantly there, but you didn't want to listen." It doesn't mean that God didn't still send the prophets and say, "Be my voice, speak on my behalf. I want my people to return to me." In today's episode, we hear that Daniel, he also comes into some opposition. He also faces hardship. In this case, the Lord was with him in a very mighty way, and that power of God, like the hand of God, is seen throughout the earth. Sometimes the prophets paid a great price. They paid with their life to follow God. In this case, God rescued Daniel. It's up to God why he chooses how to use different people in their lives. But God is glorified in both circumstances. Now, Daniel was a man who seemed to have a lot of knowledge, had a lot of wisdom. He was a learned man. He had risen above others and was pointed out for just how smart he was and how he held himself in a very distinguished way. And yet, that kind of got him in trouble by people who were jealous and people who didn't want Daniel to be in their way. They were envious of his possible promotion. I'm going to read from chapter 6, verse 3, and it says, "Now Daniel was so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps." These are kind of like the guys in charge. They just got a funky name. At this, the administrators and satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. Why? Because he was a man of character and integrity. Finally, these men said, "We will never find any basis for charges against this man unless it has something to do with his God." Now, that's a man of character and integrity. That's impressive to me, that you'd have to actually trump up some sort of charges based on how devoted he is to God. But they managed to do that. They put into law and into edict that no one can pray to anyone other than the king. And what does Daniel do in response? The same thing he's always done. He opened his window and prayed to God several times a day. Now they find him, and then they take him to the king and say, "Look, remember you made that law? Remember how you said this wasn't okay? Like everyone was supposed to pray to you for the next so many days? Well, Daniel did it." And so I'm sure they're happy thinking, "Yes, we're rid of him." But you know what happens? Daniel is placed, his execution method was supposed to be mauled by lions, which seems like a terrible death, in my opinion. And they throw him into this pit where there are lions who I'm guessing are hungry, and yet the lions don't attack him. He spends an entire night in the pit, and the king was actually very worried about him. The king wanted to make sure that he was okay. He had asked, pray to your God and maybe he will rescue you, is kind of what he's saying. In the morning, the king goes to see, what did Daniel's God do? Well, Daniel's God shut the mouths of the lions. Daniel's God was with him. And they pulled Daniel out of that pit and then actually rounded up the guys that had laid the trap for him and threw them in. It says that before they even hit the ground, that the lions had crushed them and overpowered them. So I'm thinking that they were hungry, but God really had shut the mouths of the lions. And then what happened is the king actually put forth this edict and sent it to all of the nations saying, revere the Lord God, revere his holy name. Look what he's done. And so the fame of the God of Israel, the God of Daniel, God's power is being seen throughout the nations. And that's important too. God used Daniel in a mighty way, but not only just to save him, but to further his message of his goodness to other kingdoms. Pretty cool.